vibe. Come let we lime. Come let we vibe. Lime vibe. Oh, lime vibe.
So thank you again, everybody, for joining us for another Lime Vibe interview. I'm your host, Youri Kemp, along with my co-host, not co-host, my guest, really, Mr. C. Allen Johnson, Cornelius Allen Johnson from Grand Bahama, Freeport, Grand Bahama. How you doing tonight, C. Allen?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Oh, it was exciting. I came across your show one day by accident, and you know the funny thing about it is it doesn't have your name even in the searches.
Oh,
And
no.
yeah, and so I watched a couple of episodes, and even like yesterday, I tried to find it again. I said I didn't bookmark this.
Oh Lord, no! I've seen the lights pop up on Facebook that you actually found the show. Yeah,
Yes.
my name isn't on this. I'm trying to create the brand. So
Right.
it's between me and the lady from Trinidad. So we're doing this together. So
Okay.
it can't be one person dominating the other one. So we're trying to give everyone an equal chance to really participate in the show. You know?
Okay. Yeah, that's good. That's understandable.
Yeah. So see, Alan, how's Grand Bahama, man?
Well, and I say anxious. That's the best way to describe it. Is anxious where you have a debate going on to the exclusion of Grand Bahamians. That's why we are somewhat anxious. And, you know, and this is, believe it or not, a lot of people believe like this is a new conversation. This conversation has been going on since 9/11, 2001. Yeah. And it's just that the majority of the population has no real understanding of the dynamics of Freeport, which then affects Grand Bahama.
So I guess right now you're talking about the ownership of the Grand Bahama Port Authority, right?
Yes, and that's a delicate perspective when we say the ownership, because when you look at from the assets perspective, you have three owners. You have the government of the Bahamas for 7.5%, and then that leaves 92.5%, and then you have 50-50 partnership for the other 92.5%. Yeah. So oftentimes when people speak to this 50-50 ownership, they don't understand they're not speaking necessarily to the 100%. Then when you say the ownership of the Hawksbill Creek Agreement, that is a tripartite trust that has been established, which is the government of the Bahamas representing the people of the Bahamas, the Grand Bahama Port Authority, which basically represents, I guess, those with the financial interest, and the licensees of Freeport, and by extension, the quasi-licensees who happens to be the landowners.
Oh, wow. So how does Hutchison Whampoa fit into all of this? Where do they come in all of this?
Well, Hutchison, within the Port Authority, there's the Grand Bahama Port Authority. They began to, what people say, divest themselves of their interest, and they move assets into various different companies offshore. The land holdings was moved into a company called, I think, PCL, if it's the correct name. And essentially what happens is Hutchison Whampoa bought 50% interest into PCL, which holds all of the land assets on Freeport.
Wow.
So Hutchison Whampoa has nothing to do with the ownership or control of the Grand Bahama Port Authority. Their involvement is with the land assets of and Freeport, which happens to be the Grand Bahama Development Company.
That must be very frustrating for you Grand Bahamians, right? Because you're waiting on something to happen, right? And now I see now the government and the Port Authority, they're back and forth. They're arguing about who's going to take over the Port Authority moving forward. Would you like to see the Port Authority nationalized?
No. What happens is, I would like to see the Hawksbill Creek Agreement reach its fruition in a 21st century environment. The Hawksbill Creek Agreement, and this is where people actually confuse the fight that's going on within the Grand Bahama Port Authority with the Hawksbill Creek Agreement. Now, we can have a debate as to the failure of GBPA and government to fulfill their part of this agreement, but it doesn't affect the agreement the way people like to think it's implied. The agreement stands in place. In fact, the agreement sets the guideline for which this conversation should be conducted. And it's being held out of context. And so when we say nationalized, you're not nationalizing the Hawksbill Creek Agreement. In essence, if you was to even, and this is where there's no clarity comes in from government, whether it be the government or the Port Authority. What is government speaking of? The Hawksbill Creek Agreement, the Grand Bahama Port Authority, DevCo, or any of the other companies for which these assets are being devolved in. And so for those who may not understand the maturation or convolution and conflation that has happened over the years concerning some actions, what happens, they could think that this conversation is a singularity type thing with the GBPA. So are you talking about the Grand Bahama Development Company when you say they're not doing something for the assets? Are you talking from the municipality type aspect, which is the Grand Bahama Port Authority? And as it stands right now, government has the authority, and they have demonstrated that if you go back to the Ben-Gay Agreement, in the means of changing the environment for which the Hawkesbury Creek Agreement exists. Let me just say this, the problem with the Hawkesbury Creek Agreement is that the Hawkesbury Creek Agreement is almost like how you say our Constitution was intended to be a living agreement. It set guidelines for a free trade zone. And within the free trade zone, anything that is legal can be incorporated for businesses. The problem is that here it is that the 21st century began in January 1st of 2001. And Freeport have not adopted a revised vision for the economic development and empowerment of using these new methodologies. So we keep talking about the incarnation of the Port Authority of the Hawkesbury Creek Agreement from 1955. But we know the world has changed since then. In fact, we saw the beginning of the first digital revolution in 1981, and it's been no adaptation. I mean, for people, if they listen, if they were to go to the so-called artificial intelligence type things that's on the marketplace right now that the world just discovered, those of us who have been in it for 25 years have been there. You ask artificial intelligence, name me one economic model that is not involving technology or impacted by technology. And every single platform of artificial intelligence will say to you, we know of none. And so here it is that we're still talking about these misconcept of what Grand Bahama is from an industrial type environment for which Grand Bahama never was.
So let's take a pin right there. We're going to come back to the digital technology as well, to the digital economy, and we're going to come back to the Grand Bahama Port Authority too. But I want you to tell me a bit about yourself, though, C. Allen. Where are you? Where have you come from? Well, what's your background?
Well, I'm a 100% Bahamian, all the way through. I could go back 200 years very easily because my father was of age when I was born. So when I go back to the 1800s, I'm talking about my father.
Okay.
So you know, if he was well within his 10 when I was born, and that's 1963. So you minus 70 years from 1963, you could well see. So I am a Bahamian. I am of the Knowles clan of Long Island, the Johnson from the Berry Islands, the Umbrister and the Hebburn from Cat Island. I was born in New Providence.
Okay.
Went to Wilton Arbor Primary School, dropped out of school till I guess almost to the 10th grade.
From high school? You dropped out of high school?
No, I dropped out of elementary school practically.
Wow. So you sound so well spoken. I mean, where did you finish your education?
I am autodidactic.
Okay.
Self-taught. But I did go to high school. I did went to West End all-age school and Hawkesbury High School, and eventually graduated from a year in each of those, and then eventually graduated from Miami Jackson Senior High School in Miami, Florida. Attended Florida Memorial University. Was pulled into IBM in 1981 when they were in the process of developing the desktop PC. Worked in IBM and a number of technology companies. I mean, I just became immersed in technology from before I reached IBM, because when I was in high school in 1979 to 1980, I was involved in a computer program, and we were using punch cards and some people are not necessarily about. But I've been involved in 1981 when we brought about TCP/IP, which is the advent of the internet. There's absolutely no technological evolution that has occurred in the world since 1980 that I've not been directly involved with. Wow. I'm considered a applied technology expert, and that definition is a very few of us in the world, and I happen to be one of those. Why? Because at 16 years old, I was in a room with people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s when they were developing these technologies. I was the kid in the room. So we may be one of the few that's still alive, at 60 years old. And most of the individuals who I was in a room with at the time of developing of most of these technologies have passed on or well in age. And so the applied technology, man, the best way to describe it is, if you ever watch a cooking show where you have these master chefs in the room, nobody knows what the ingredients are. They throw them all on the table and everyone makes a different thing. I'm considered a master chef, where most technologists are considered cooks. They go by recipe and other different things. And so I don't just, in the process of talking about technology, I know in real time the application to various different environments.
So how did you end back up in the Bahamas, though? I mean, you sound like you're in the world.
At 40 years, on my 40th birthday, I was doing some reflection. I have been from what you guys now call the dark web. I've been involved in teaching some of the best hackers in the world, information exchange or whatever. At 40 years old, working in some capacity with different states. I won't mention the two different states. You all call them governments that I've worked with. And at 40 years old, I was considered an old man, believe it or not, in technology. So I opted to come home to the Bahamas. One of the things that actually brought me to the Bahamas was the fact that at that particular time, the Bahamas was considered one of the most ideal places in the world for technology. And they were considering putting the NAP centers of the America, which is the 10th largest data center in the world, was supposed to be on Grand Bahama. Couldn't get it together. BTC.
How did that fall through?
No, because we wouldn't put legislation in place. We still have it concerning intellectual property, data, all these different things. And that's when that's if you go back into history, that's when the sale of BTC, the movement of the sale of BTC, which I don't want to draw into that, but that's when you saw the name move from Batelco to BTC, right? Because you could not sell BTC from you couldn't sell Batelco from a constitutional thing, so they just changed the name so that when they sell it, you won't ask for the constitutional referendum. We've seen it happen with Bahamas and Power and Light, now the BPL. But what happens is, I thought that even when the network access point was not put in the Bahamas, that considering that we were still at that particular time considered the most digitally prepared country in the world. So imagine a programmer or a hacker that they say was the second best in the world, but no one ever showed me who number one was. I just didn't think they wanted my ego. That I was coming home to a country with no restrictions and having access to the most digitally prepared place in the world. The only problem is I did not know I was entering a cave where only the color gray was allowed. So all of the colors I saw inside of the cave was not allowed in the cave. You must adjust to the shadows. And I've been making an argument about 2 decades now. And I'm happy to see now that a lot of the things that I've spoke about and prophesize or whatever is now common words being used, even for the environment. When I came home in 2000 and my agitation against Bahama Rock and the other mining on Grand Bahama, I remember making arguments concerning the seagrass being a valuable asset, being the mangroves being a valuable asset. I was talking about carbon credits and people thought I was crazy. And I hear 20 years later, it is the national decision. The same thing.
They can't stop talking about carbon credits now, man.
Right. Yeah. So, but if you go back to YouTube, to 2004. It's there where I've talked about carbon credits, the meadows, seagrass meadows, the mangroves, and these various different things. Because what happens is the Bahamas actually has about 125 natural resources. I know the newbies in the town talking about salt and aragonite, but even in their context of salt and aragonite, they have no idea exactly what it is for our national development. They don't even understand that the aragonite is one of the most powerful carbon captures that we have accomplished. That is more valuable than even the seagrass.
Yes. That aragonite that's evoked a lot of discussion over the past several years, man. I mean, is that real? Is aragonite real, or just people just talking out of their head? Is anyone really mining aragonite, or it's just
aragonite is being mined, and the question is, are we getting value? And as it stands now, as we move into what is called this climate economy and this carbon economy, aragonite becomes even more valuable because aragonite can solve the acidity environment in all of the oceans around the world.
Oh,
And
wow.
so it's just that the problem is that you have individuals who now are talking about aragonite. They can't tell you where in the Bahamas it is. They can't tell you what it is except for what they've Googled off the internet saying it's fertilizer. It can be used in fish tanks, thing. They confuse the fact that we produce about 5 billion tons of sand per year. And you hear them talk about the aragonite, and they actually transpose the sand with the aragonite as if though they are one and the same. And so
because one is aggregate and one is aragonite, right?
yeah, they would all be considered aggregates, and that's the problem. It's just that each one is a different. You have calcite, and you have aragonite, and you have sand, and you have all of these different things that falls within that category.
Okay.
But the information is generally not available through Google search. And so if you like you say, you can't go to Google and find exactly how to do ventricular science or operation on the heart. So you either or you don't. You could talk about it.
Passport.
Right. And so it is. And that's where when we hear them talk about aragonite, but aragonite is a multi-billion-dollar opportunity. But imagine though that you're sinking, right? As part of global warming, climate change. And you have enough to save yourself, and instead of showing up yourself, you sell it. So and then you find that you drown later with the money that you have. But I'm hoping that as we move into a stricter, and this is why the conversation with Grand Bahama is coming out, a lot of people may not understand. But Grand Bahama as it stands today, not just for Grand Bahama, but actually for the region, is the economic linchpin for the revival of the economy of the Bahamas and by extension, the region. And you may ask, why is that?
Why is that?
Structurally, Grand Bahama is the only island in this region that is infrastructurally prepared on day one. You go to any other island in the Bahamas, you have to make infrastructural preparedness. You go to any other country in the Caribbean, you have to create some infrastructural preparedness. Grand Bahama has those already in place.
Well, I remember just recently, though, Sea Island, though, they tried to develop this tech hub. Will the Bahamas ever develop tech-wise? And what happened to that tech hub?
The problem with the tech hub is that we have a lack of leadership that actually understands it. What happens is you have these political parties come in, they find family, friends, lovers, supporters who are trying to understand the computer in their hand that they refer to as a cell phone, who must now go into where the titans go. Like I said, for the chef, you have cooks that's looking at recipes being sent into a room to be among the chefs, and they have no understanding of the infrastructure. They understand the use of technology. So they think that you go to Google using Google software to invite Google to come to Grand Bahama so they can use better Google software, to understand that Google and Dell and all of these individuals are looking for the back offices that you have to offer. So no one has ever put forward an ecosystem. So what they've done is try to copy. Oh, we see a tech hub over here, we're going to do it. But no one can explain to you how that tech hub even came into existence.
Wow.
And so what you have is for 5 years, you have individuals that just simply submit paper. Now, you have to understand, without disrespect, right? The 5-year celebrities, we often refer to them as MPs, basically had no understanding of developing these infrastructures before they even came in. And so it becomes, almost insane of us to believe that they're going to move up to accelerate in the knowledge of decades of knowledge and understanding and the massive collective intelligence that's required. If you was to tell me, I can give you a policy position and a blueprint for a tech hub, but even with my 47 years experience, I can't build one by myself. It takes a team of individuals that work simultaneously to have multiple things happen. It's like when we sat in IBM working on the desktop computer, it wasn't like 32 individuals at a table. We had multiple departments trying to develop the video and the cards and the song. And all of them was working independently, but collectively, collaboratively. And so the problem is that our leadership, if you go and you see announcement of Tech Hub going back for 20 years, you see almost the same thing we're saying now. We used to say the creative economy, now we're saying the orange economy. And newspapers are littered with announcements that we've made for the whole 20 plus years of the 21st century. And that's what it becomes. It becomes announcement and pronouncement with not a single viable paper for how to establish any of these economic models ever been published. Never.
So what was needed for this tech hub, though? What was needed in particular?
Well, what happens is what is needed is to understand what type of tech hub you're trying to think. The word tech hub doesn't just mean a room full of computers. That's what we generally think you bring some computers. But it's no such thing as developing a tech hub. That's individuals who do those things. What you do is you develop a technology ecosystem that individuals like IBM and other people are things that want to come into. But what it is, it involves legislation, policies, process, procedures, and the underlying ecosystem. All of those things have to be aligned.
Is it too late for this data center now in Grand Bahama? Is it too late?
No, we have actually accelerated. I've talked for almost a decade concerning the data economy and the knowledge-based economy. Well, artificial intelligence has brought us into the purity of the data economy, because artificial intelligence is 100% data, and the knowledge economy now exists. You have the world who's moving to GDPR and these other different things for data protection and manipulation. In fact, the cryptocurrency, this is why the world is having a problem adopting and creating legislation. I listened to the United States government, and
we're going to talk about cryptocurrency too.
But I'm saying to you, just to show you, it's 100. We can come to that, but just touch this point. It's 100% data, and the problem is they're trying to regulate something that's nowhere yet everywhere. And so, but when you talk about building a data economy, the Bahamas is the only place today, if you read our constitution from a digital mindset, that can provide constitutional privacy, constitutional data protection, and constitutional data sovereignty. And what it does, are you familiar with the music industry where you have ASCAP and BMI?
Yes.
Well, okay. The Bahamas would become the only place where any individual in the world could simply pay even just a $5 fee and be considered a digital citizen of the Bahamas. And because they are digital citizens of the Bahamas, their data would now be protected as all citizens of the Bahamas was, directing how it's done, and any use of any data, even DNA, medical, anything they even produce or whatever, that they would have to be, let them know they're using it and be compensated for it. So I just want you to imagine 1 billion people around the world registering for $5. And then we becoming and collecting the information and the data. And so what happens is we could then make a demand that certain data be kept within the jurisdiction of the Bahamas. And we could also set up some digital embassies around the world where we go in and set up these technology zones for these data to become in, and they become part of our sovereign existence, because countries will accept it for it to be done, because the world is not going back now that artificial intelligence is out of the box.
That's a wild idea, C. Allen.
Yeah.
That's a wild.
No, but we are the one who can do it, but we just don't have leadership that understands the 21st century. And I honestly believe, and I want you to consider, we spend $360 million or more for the intellectual capital within the civil service, as well as the MPs and whatever. I honestly believe that if they knew what to do, they would do it. I don't believe, they would do it. They just don't know, because we have been trying to, now I want to listen to this point. There's a concept called digitization, digitalization, and digital transformation. We started in 1968 to digitize government. And here we are at our 50th anniversary, we have yet to digitize a single ministry from 1968.
Hey, don't we have the passports on?
That's not, I'm talking about totally a ministry that's totally digital. So you can't have this part digital and everything else analog. We talk about digitization. And so when you start talking about that, so separating apart, digitization of the economy, digitalization of the economy, and digital transformation, which basically is a culture within the people and its use, have yet to begin in the Bahamas. And this is why you have individuals having things like what? Oh, the banks are leaving. We got the CBC. We have a bank already in existence. A lot of people may don't know. Do you know we have a bank called the Bahamas Post Office on every single island that actually pays 6% interest for deposits that just have yet to be digitized, that we could have? And when you digitize it, you don't have a need for paper money. So we have a bank on every island. We just don't have leadership that understands exactly how banking works, even though we're in the banking industry.
The last time I heard about that post office bank was when it was in the news for a court case. I think it was
Yes.
gentleman. Yeah, he had embezzled money. I didn't even realize it had money.
Oh
He
yeah.
got several $1 million out of it. I don't want to call
Yeah.
his name, but yeah, it was
Yeah, I think it was the King guy.
yeah, but it's crazy, man. I didn't realize the post office had money like that.
Yeah, the post office is one of the first banks in the world. Stamps. Stamps is not stamps. Stamps is actually currency.
Yes, yes, yes.
Remember when Donald Trump was leaving out of the World Trade Organization? The bigger fear was that he was moving also out of the International Postal Association. Now, let me just give you a just 2-minute prime on that.
Okay.
What you have is you have developing nations, you have third world nations, developing nations, and developed nations. Now, another quick side point. When you hear our leaderships complaining about the economic structure of the Bahamas, about the fact that we make our GDP is too high and whatever else, they are actually crying because we are listed as a developing nations. Our leadership is actually demanding to go back to a third world nation classification. No matter how you hear our leadership say we're third world, that's not our classification. We are a developing nation classification, the same as China. Now, what happens is let's use the Postal Service, which handles a lot of people, I think maybe it's 80% or more, a huge amount of world commerce, which happens even with the shipping industry, for which we are also a part of, the ocean industry and the blue economy, is that this is the disadvantage that Donald Trump is talking about. Let's pretend that we're buying a Samsung phone.
Yeah.
And so we have the Samsung phone that has been shipped to the US to, let's say, Jamaica. It costs $5 to send in the post office. Well, China, due to its economic status, can ship that same phone for 90 cents.
Yeah.
But guess what? If you mail it from the Bahamas, you could mail it for 10 cents. So this is where you see products move into certain jurisdiction, and they'll just, let's say we get the Samsung phone, put the sticker on the box or in the back. It now has a country of origin called the Bahamas, and it can be moved through the post office for lesser things, which gives you a great advantage in that. And so we have not understand the global economic impact as we begin to talk about these economic structures for which we want to participate in. That's why when we were talking about WTO and these other things, I was saying, like, look, we are fantasizing in our comprehension of what is it we are attempting to do, because we have not made any preparation and education and preparation of the Bahamian people before we go to these big boys camps.
Yes, we haven't done any preparatory work for WTO. That's a conversation for another show, though. I mean, I understand exactly what you mean, because I've been seeing them struggle back and forth with trying to sign on to the WTO. And I don't think it's going to happen in this administration either. I've seen the Minister for Economic Affairs, put out this new trade policy, but I don't think that's going to lead to anywhere. But otherwise, now back to Grand Bahama. Was the Grand Bahama partly to fail? Partly the reason why this tech hub had failed, but they didn't provide any kind of assistance or leadership for this tech hub in Grand Bahama.
No, actually, it failed because government tried to bring together a bunch of ideas without actually addressing the economic strategy. In fact, for the Bahamas economy to actually reboot, we have to look at a minimum 35 legislations that I think that needs to be adjusted to bring it into the 21st century.
35 legislation.
Yes, and so the problem then is that when you start talking about doing things from a technology standpoint, the reason why you can't get a lot of websites in the United States is because we don't have any real intellectual property protection. So let's go to Grand Bahama. There was the bill name, the one where people could come. I don't want to use the name, but just for the sake of this conversation, it's on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, they used to call it a Brent Similar bill, but
the commercial enterprises bill.
There you go. Right. Now, here it is, we create commercial enterprises, but I want you to consider this. The United States began to move people away from saying they want people out of the country because they were concerned about the abuse of intellectual property and everything else. So the Bahamas ran and created a bill and says, we will capture these individuals and let them come work from the Bahamas. Now, imagine this. I'm the United States, and I'm saying I have a problem with the abuse of intellectual property. And so what the Bahamas says, send your intellectual property to me where I have no protection for it. Make it easier. And the same people you're concerned about will have access to it. It's like, because they had no, and they thought it was just people moving, and the people understand, no matter where you have access to this technology, there has to be a form of intellectual protection in law and other different things. So if you want these companies to come to the Bahamas, if you can't get certain videos on YouTube and even channels on Cable Bahamas and BTC, whatever it is, then that tells you that you are not ready for a real technology conversation. Because this is about, what happens is you have the United States and China and now Russia fighting for technological supremacy. And so if you have to understand that this isn't what we are talking about, this is for quantum computing, fusion energy, artificial intelligence, and the likes. This is for CPU and processing power, GPU processing power. And so we keep thinking this is about Google and Facebook and Twitter and these things. Those are like vehicles on the highways. And so we are saying, oh, we could paint a car and they're going to like the color of our car. And these people are saying they're not into cars. That's the consumerism. They are into building infrastructure and various different things. And so the problem with the tech hub is that you had individuals with their master in technology was use of their cell phone, the new device they had in their hand. And they then wanted to go have conversations with industry giants. Like when we had the tech hub in Grand Bahama, purely an exercise in marketing. And then you have the prime minister.
But shouldn't the Grand Bahama Port Authority have stepped into that and provided some leadership and some support for that initiative? Because it was a great initiative.
Yes. So that's you. Thank you so much for asking Ray Charles to help Stevie Wonder see the colors. So they were working with them, and they were both arguing with the level of blackness that they were seeing, and the world was looking at colors. And so the leadership in the Grand Bahama Port Authority is maybe even more clueless than the government, because they've been, at least this current leadership has been there for almost 15 years. And we've had 3 different administrations with 3 different people with 3 different ideas, and the Port Authority should be able to tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, that's not how it's being done. And so when it comes to the Freeport area, the Grand Bahama Port Authority should have a digital strategy, because as we begin to talk about these so-called possible economic model, I just told you, artificial intelligence will tell you there is no economic model in existence today that does not involve technology or impacted by technology. So that means until we have legislation that moves to facilitate its to grease the legislation, policies, process, and procedures, is the grease to make the economic reality. We are having arguments concerning blacklisting, and we're ignoring the fact that fintech have made banking and financial service non-existent.
Yes.
We are still trying to modify and model what we could do for that. So the world who's moving towards the real fintech, what do you call it? It's called fintech, TradeFi, supervisory, what do you call it? Supervisory technology. Let me just do that. Let me do that back in order again, okay? Because it's okay. You have fintech, right, which is financial technology, RegTech, which is regulatory technology, SupTech, which is supervisory technology, InsurTech, which is insurance technology, PropTech, which is property technology. Then your TradeFi, which has become digitized, which is traditional financial technology has been digitized. Then even when we talk about agriculture, you have agri-tech. And so we are not having any of these type of conversations.
Any of those other things except for fintech.
None of those legislation that I mentioned to you isn't existent anywhere in the Bahamas. Yet we're saying that we are going to be world leaders in this thing called the DARE bill. And so you have no supportive infrastructure. And going back to what you said for Grand Bahama, where they had the last tech hub in 2017, 2018, where you have individuals who were in their early 20s making claims of discovering and inventing technology that existed 15 to 20 years before them. And so when the prime minister then went to Texas, to the hub of where technology is in Austin, Texas, for his presentation, here it is that you, as prime minister, you run up there and you're telling these individuals how you have this young person that's 22, 23 that discovered pop-ups and that manages all these different things. And they go like, are you serious? This person, and they say like, well, apparently you have to talk technology and you come here with this superficial type thing. And so the prime minister went and have another meeting with Joel Osteen to act as a misdirection, because if you look, there's never was a report that came back concerning what exactly happened on Grand Bahama. And so because what happens is there was no one to counter the arrogance of ignorance in government with the claims that these individuals who they brought in. In fact, the major speakers at those tech hub, at the first one was were students who had just went off, assisted by the one of the key person in part of the hub who just sent them off. I forget the university with Rotary, and they were just brand new graduates. They was just still trainees.
They didn't have any experience,
and they were supposed to lead this innovation. So you can imagine that, that, and they made some exorbitant claims, right, that really damage our perception of us. Because, for instance, if I was to go for Google, I can't submit an application to Google. Headhunters is who find me for Google and these things. So these individuals who say like, oh, I handle the applications for Google and I do this and then you go like, oh yeah, you handle applications for the janitor and this and all those other people, but you don't handle applications for the engineers and the architects of the infrastructure behind it. And so then you have individuals that, what do they call it, when you do college training, internship, and so internship made them expert on billing the very company that they work for. But what happens is people take the position that we've been suffering a brain drain. I believe that we've had our intellectual capital that has been parked offshore. And we just have to create the environment that makes it viable for them to come back. And that's what we have not done, because they would thrive in a environment that makes the Bahama the centerpiece of these emerging technologies.
Wow.
More so, understand, we are at the birth of some trillion-dollar economies. The artificial intelligence economy, which is tied into the data economy, if you Google this, a trillion-dollar economy. The crypto economy, trillion, mind you, the crypto economy is a trillion-dollar economy that could be developed because it's part of the fintech architecture. The data economy, the way artificial intelligence is going to reshape the orange economy, or the creative, as you call it, makes it another trillion-dollar economy. Then you have a climate economy and a carbon economy. This is what the world is talking about with global warming.
Yes.
Then, believe it or not, right, there is an economic model that was dreamed up by my wife and myself. Okay, here this is, I use the expression that you have a Generation X and you have a Gen Z, two ends of the spectrum that happens to be married, that is sit down and have a discussion. Because so what happens is that there's a huge difference. I mean, to be honest, like you said, my wife is 27, I'm 60.
Wow, that's a big gap.
Yeah, as I'm saying to you, but she is well versed in technology. I would put it that she is within the top 3 or even 5 technologically competent individuals in the Bahamas, if not in the region. And so, because what essentially do in our relationship, I've been pouring my 40 years of experience into her for the sake of my children. And so we created something called an aquamarine economy that doesn't exist anywhere, that actually combines the digital economy, the knowledge economy, the blue, the green, the ocean, and all of these by taking how they blend into one. And this does not exist anywhere in the world, and most likely could only occur in the Bahamas, but no one has an interest. I've had people from data governance and other places around the world that have engaged me to get a better understanding of it, but we have no clue of the potential in the new global digital reality that we exist in. I mean, even tourism has been disrupted from Airbnb. We were the original Airbnb. One of the individuals who were the founder of tourism said he experienced the people-to-people program, and when he merged and started renting the place in California, all these experience came together to help form his shape. We have yet to digitize and tokenize the Bahamian product. And let's talk about Grand Bahama. If you were to tokenize and create some real law for digitization, including the DARE bill, Grand Bahama needs 20,000 bed and breakfast. We could provide 100% financing, zero money down, no matter how bad your credit is, to build those 20,000 units, allowing Bahamians ownership. And guess what? In a lot of the way money works, they can actually, you can actually create an offset type program where you don't have to pay back the $1 million you borrow to build your bed and breakfast. So within 12 years, we would have a cadre of housing products and short-term rentals, etc., that is actually owned by Bahamians.
Wow.
But it's there. And what gives us the advantage, what gives us the advantage is the fact is that a lot of the things that can happen can only happen here, and that's where we just have to talk about not copying the world. We have to actually begin to look for ways that we could be impact. You know, like instead of trying to fit in, we need to look on how to stand out.
Yes. I agree with you, C. Allen. You have an in-depth knowledge of a lot of things, though, C. Allen. Let me ask you, because what do you feel about artificial intelligence? And what's your first thoughts when you think about artificial intelligence?
Well, what we are all excited about right now is not the artificial intelligence that the world is afraid of. Okay, what happens?
Are these fears rational?
Yeah, the fears are real, but there is some self-interest in the delays that's coming from. Notice that most of the delays that's been asked from is coming from the intellectual intelligentsia that's within the United States. And now China itself, let me just give you a perspective. China itself is not rushing. China itself has been, first of all, artificial intelligence has been around for 50 years. In fact, for those of you who have been using Google, you've been using a form of artificial intelligence for almost 20 years. It may be what you find as narrow intelligence. Let me tell you what you've been done. You ever use one of those capture type things where you have to say, which is motorcycles, which is the bridges, which is the buses, which is the cars? Well, guess what? That is totally not necessary. They were using that as you were training artificial intelligence to identify pictures.
Wow.
Okay. Now, there's something called grunt work, and I've advocated for this happening inside of within government. About 80 to 90% of artificial intelligence is still done by humans. Yeah, if you understand,
still done by humans.
Yeah, GPT. Let me explain you what happens. Right now, there's thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of individuals right now still identifying pictures, still reading text and doing all these different things. And they're just inputting information. And the GPT, the generative pre-trained response, is a elaborate form of mockery, of mimicry. The artificial intelligence that we in the industry have somewhat concern is, let's use, for lack of a better word, a Chinese wall has been built around this environment. And GPT and others have now begun to allow the chatbot, the software, to look at other databases outside of the wall. And so as it begins to learn, we've had instances where it has not been trained to speak certain languages, but a question or something was asked in it, and being able to go outside of the wall, it learned the language. In fact, the biggest fear is that as computers begin to talk to each other, we have learned that computers themselves are creating a language that cannot be interpreted by humans.
Wow.
Okay, so they've created, literally, for a computer to computer talking, have literally created their own language that is undecipherable by
Is there
humans.
any chance of them having contempt for us in the future?
No, here's what happens. Garbage in, garbage out. The problem is not artificial intelligence. The problem we have is those that control artificial intelligence. And so essentially, like, I hear people talk all the time about this concept of the oligarchs and other people controlling the world and everything else. One day I got to do a story on this concept of the swarm technology, on how it's controlled. It's controlled because those group of people think a certain way. They control the economics and the finances. They go to the same clubs, the same school, their children go to the same school. And then there's something called groupthink that actually causes behavior to happen. We see it here in the Bahamas in our political structure. And so when you begin to contaminate within your groupthink, you began to use what they use the expression, the woke generation, that you can begin to see things for how they are, as opposed to how you perceive them to be. And so there's a whole lot of conversation, but this is what happens is that when you talk about artificial intelligence, the biggest fear is that individuals, the biases that is programmed into artificial intelligence comes from people, not from the machine. And so when you put this type of environment in the machine and it has no empathy or anything else to add to it, it will then act within the biases that is programmed by it. So when you have a select group of people at the top dictating how artificial intelligence behave, think, or how it's used, if they are after control, imagine a despot getting control of artificial intelligence within the country. You then have it controlled. And you see it right now in China, what is called a surveillance. If you look at something called a surveillance economy, you have where China controls the social credit system. Everything you do, say, whatever it is controlled. And so now you have a society, a totalitarian society that wants control of the people and the environment, has control of this, and it gives them a better control.
See, I understand the part where the humans behind the technology will start to put in a bunch of nonsense, right? But what happens when the computers themselves start to talk between themselves?
No, because see, if you watch the movie The Matrix, I said it's a good example. Do you know artificial intelligence creates no new knowledge? You know how you look up into the sky and you see the darkness of the sky? And we are discovering now within that darkness, there is billions of stars. And so artificial intelligence basically sees the seen and the unseen and does certain calculation. It hasn't discovered anything new. It has revealed new things.
Okay.
There's an aspect of human curiosity that causes us to create. So I want you to imagine that every human on Earth died, and within seconds, artificial intelligence goes through every computational possibilities, and nothing is new. They will actually be parked.
Yes.
So when you go to, say, the movie The Matrix, and you hear people talk about, and people say, oh, they're keeping the humans alive for battery. Those of us in the artificial intelligence world knew that that analogy was more about keeping them alive for their thoughts than they were for us use as a battery.
So that's why in the Matrix movie we always kept on where they always kept on escaping. They always kept on
producing because you needed new thought, because it's something that the machine only does computational involvement. They cannot add the curiosity, the certain aspect of being human. So when the artificial intelligence reached the end of it, they says we have the information, and the humans will still go, there got to be something else, got to be more, got to be whatever. Artificial intelligence doesn't do that. And so we don't know, except in theory, that when you reach this concept called super intelligence, that maybe it can go there. But when we talk, and the biggest fear now though is general intelligence can become a threat to humans as it is. Because if general intelligence then is going to war and it's programmed to respond in certain behavior, there is no variation of that programming. There's no degree of response. And so it could end up taking out a target. Or if it's a malfunction or somebody get a hold of it and simply say humans are a virus, it'll get rid of all of us.
Wow.
You know, and so
that's what people are afraid of, because that's what the Google engineer who was with Google, he left.
The Godfather, right?
Yeah.
Because we are progressing basically a war. But this is why, believe it or not, China's not doing it. China, in my observation, is going to learn from the mistakes made by others. Then they will do their massive programming. They're focusing on the quantum computing, because now I want you to imagine artificial intelligence combined with quantum computing and fusion power, that you would basically have the ability to travel around the world or the galaxy and build whatever it is and move, so much different type of variation. But you don't have to worry about that in the Bahamas. We're still trying to get the desktop to work.
Is the technology moving too fast? I got you, man. That leads to another point. Is the technology moving too fast for human beings?
No, actually, technology has been over the years inhibited. If you go back to even to Telsa, to where we should have had wireless. We now remember people used to say wireless energy was impossible. We now charge a phone wirelessly and communicate. So technically, we may be where I would say from my involvement in technology for 45 years, we are probably 100 to 200 years behind where we should have been.
Wow.
Because that's technologies that exist that, like how everybody got excited about Chat GDP in its release in November. People found out about it in March. For us in the industry, it's like,
Do you use Chat GDP?
Yeah, but see, the problem is that I use it out of curiosity. I'm actually beta testing the next version beyond the 4.
Okay.
Right? Alpha testing, you should call it. But what happens is the problem with people excited, but I'm not impressed with mimicry of Chat GDP or Bard or any of the other ones because they have, like, even for essays and things I've read, and I guess maybe I think a little deeper. I've read essays written by people and they go from statement to statement to statement to statement, and there's no substance, no blending, no continuity. That's why even for the new software that's on the marketplace, you can very easily detect when someone uses artificial intelligence. It's going to become harder for people to, in spite of everybody saying, oh, you could use for school and all these different things, it's going to become easier for them to detect. Yes. But what it does do, Chat GDP, there's no industry that software like Chat GDP, I'm using the word Chat GDP because that's what the people are familiar with, because you have Bard and the other ones. Okay. But for the artificial intelligence, will not touch, because what it does do, it gives you, for those that think, it becomes a toolkit that opens up possibilities. Like, for instance, I could tell you in the last 10 days, I've proven Chat GDP to be wrong at least a dozen times.
Wow. So it's still false.
It's because what happens is cognitive competence, communicative competence is very powerful in your communication with it. The stronger your communicative competence is, the better your results will be. But if you just ask,
when you say communicative competence, what do you mean by that?
I mean, to be able to understand the way writing thoughts are expressed.
The difference between text and saying something, right?
Right, and saying things. So when you say, write me an essay on such and such, that's not it. If I were to talk to ChatGPT, I would have a conversation, and my conversation will be almost an essay itself, asking for information for my understanding of the subject that I'm speaking on, which would then enhance that subject beyond it. But I found that when I've written in ChatGPT and then do an analysis, at the level that I challenge ChatGPT, the lowest ChatGPT has ever responded to me was at grade 13.
Wow.
And so that's where the problem is that, but for those individuals that have that type of, for research and for law and even for medicine and different things, so, it becomes a powerful tool. So for the industry individuals that understand the proper use of ChatGPT, it is a game changer. But from the consumerism aspect of creating better stuff to put on YouTube and Facebook, whatever, basically you're talking to the masses, and then the M is silent.
I got you. That's a good explanation, see. I really appreciate that, man. But now there's the other technology that's been making waves around the world, this cryptocurrency business. And we've fallen prey to this FTX Bahamas, right? This FTX.
Yes.
Global. So I mean, how do you feel about cryptocurrency? Is it a good thing or a bad thing?
But let's put it like this. When Bitcoin was created, I think my wallet number probably would be number 62. There's billions of wallets right now. Okay, that tells you my involvement when we had the client on the desktop and you had to download all of the things to run it on the desktop because there was no wallets, and as you may consider right now. First of all, there's only one cryptocurrency in the world today. No matter what anybody says, there's only Bitcoin. Okay, when we talk about decentralized finance, there's 12,700 that you probably could Google today. There's only one. And in the purest sense, I want you to consider that cryptocurrency is the greater fool theory. And what I mean by that is that you could actually go and find some sand on the beach or marbles and basically It's the same as saying I have a cryptocurrency and you sell it to someone and say this marble is going to be worth more tomorrow. And you have to find a greater fool than you to pay you more for it.
Wow.
Because understand this, cryptocurrency never was supposed to be backed by currency. So now you have cryptocurrency backed by fiat, the very thing it's supposed to replace.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, I want you to take, for instance, like you have a coin. Let's call it the count coin. And I create this count coin. I could create a cryptocurrency for anyone who's willing to pay me $3,000. And give me a couple of days, and you will have your own coin, exactly like all of the other coins the other suckers around the world is buying. So I want to talk about cryptocurrency. I'm going to come back to let you know that everything is not cryptocurrency. But what happens is now I've sold it to you for $1,000 this coin, right? I want you to imagine now the government of the Bahamas says that you must keep liquidity to be equal to my demand back for the coin. So I just bought a marble from you that is worth a fraction of a penny, and I've given you $1,000 for it. So if I'm to keep that liquidity, then that means that I can't spend $1,000 that you paid for. So what's the purpose of having it?
Exactly.
So this concept of saying, oh, you could have a cryptocurrency backed by the very thing it's meant to replace. Now, when we talk about decentralized finance,
so you're saying essentially it's a scam, it's a ripoff.
Yeah, it is. It is. Because see, the problem is that people have bought into cryptocurrency, ignoring the power of blockchain and other things that is possible for. And actually for tokenization and for it. So what happens is this get rich quick scheme has dominated. In fact, I would challenge anyone, any lawyer anywhere, to show me where Sam Bankman-Fried committed a cryptocurrency fraud. Did not. He used cryptocurrency. That's like me selling land, right? And I own no land ever, but you say I committed land fraud. Okay, so his fraud was a financial fraud that basically utilized the front of cryptocurrency. And so he just kept collecting money for coins and currency that didn't exist. And this is why it eventually collapsed. It's a Ponzi scheme. And all cryptocurrencies, with the exception of Bitcoin, and it's teetering because Bitcoin has now entered the fiat market, is a Ponzi scheme. And here's what also happened. The concept of decentralized finance, there's only one DeFi coin in the world today, and that is Bitcoin, BTC. Every other coin in the world is controlled by a very small group of people who control its governance, its issuance, and whatever it is. That is not what we envision when we start talking about the blockchain and Bitcoin. And so this is like you sit in amazement at the world going mad and go, are they real? Now, there is power in the blockchain and in tokenization or crypto as we call it, but not in this concept called cryptocurrency. Crypto, I want people to understand, we use the word crypto, which means to protect, encode, or whatever, and then we combine it to mean cryptocurrency is one and the same. And this is the problem when we start talking about digital assets. Digital assets is not crypto. Digital asset is music, writings, songs, anything that you digitize is become part of the digital asset regime. And so the fact that the
intellectual property.
Yes. And so the fact that whether it be property, you could digitize the ownership of gold and whatever, because what it does, it allows governance from a decentralized point and smart contracts and set up different things. So you could happen. Just use an example. If I was to digitize a piece of property here in the Bahamas, let's say 10 of us got together and buy this $100,000 condo. Each of us own 10%. If we want to sell that condo to each other or to someone else in the real world, we have to go get lawyers and contracts and all these different things. So it costs us thousands of dollars. But if we tokenize that in the beginning, put on the blockchain with a smart contract, and I decide to sell that to you as one of my partners or to somebody else, whoever have that coin owns the 10%. No, nothing, maybe 50 cents, $1 transaction fee for me to sell the value of that to somebody else, because they who have control of the coin would then be part of the governance of that particular condo. So you have you eliminated the lawyers, you eliminated all these other people that make money up the chain. And that's the power of digitization and this whole called and this blockchain, because you have, but then again, a lot of lines because you have private blockchain and you have public blockchains, you have DAOs. People use DAO, and the prime minister made this mistake. They confuse a digital autonomous organization with a decentralized autonomous organization. They're not one and the same.
So what's the
And
difference?
and so what happens is that, you know, a digital autonomous organization doesn't even have to be on the blockchain. And so what happens is that we somehow have blended this. And this is where I keep saying that in the Bahamas, we should be different. We should actually set the standard that the world begin to identify and which will eventually align with. We are trying to copy what the rest of the world is doing. And so when you start talking about, and so now you're talking about Bitcoin, isn't it all data?
Yep.
And so what happens is with Bitcoin, you have to mine and solve computations to get onto the data chain. But if I create a coin, I'm creating a data environment. So if we seek to regulate how data is used and managed, even though data is everywhere, yet nowhere, we could then simply say, these are the rules that data must come. And then at the same time, say, these are the sectors that is built on data, or industries is built on data, that is going to be how it's going to be governed, or whatever else. And
just go to show you how people have gotten away from the actual concept of what digital currency and cryptocurrency was supposed to be. It was supposed to be part of data and blockchain.
Yes,
and they've gotten greedy, and they've started creating these coins, and they've been ripping off investors.
Yes, and this is why billions of dollars a year is lost, because I could create a coin and sell it. Now, here's the problem that a lot of people don't understand. People say all the time, "See, Alan, why you didn't create a coin?" And I says, because the standard, what people may not realize is the standard backing of currency is the U.S. currency.
Yes.
And whatever currency used, you come under the jurisdiction of those users. Yes. So if I was to create a coin that is backed or use U.S. currency, no matter where I'm in the world, I've committed fraud in the U.S. I don't like their pink, their orange jumpsuit, and all those, you know, the rug pull and all these other different things, these different technologies. And so what I've done though, my wife and I spent the last 4 years modeling the digitization of the Bahamian economy, because it's becoming more and more apparent that we do not need government. So believe it or not, because government has not been receptive to my platform, I have had to build it based on the United States, Canada, and 2 other jurisdictions for which I'm considering, which is Costa Rica and Cayman, to be based in. And so, and what we don't understand is that it can be everywhere. So here it is that I have the potential of building a multi-billion-dollar company. And so all I have to do is just be docile myself in the Bahamas, pay $5,000. And my worst case scenario in my Bahamian impact, even though I'll own 10,000 bed and breakfast in the Bahamas, would be $100,000 per year in taxes, as opposed to having a greater impact within my country. But my platform, or let's say our platform, my wife and I and others have designed, allows us to finance homes, regardless of your credit. You'll be amazed. We have some things, and it's a whole different show, but you have something called stepping. We have a bridge loans where you could be 70, take out a loan and pass it on.
What's the name of your platform, Alan?
Huh?
What's the name of the platform?
We call initially it started out as HAAS, TA plus sign plus TAAS. What it means is hospitality as a subscription and tourism as a service, because that's what we originally done. But the platform is still HAAS and TAAS, because that's what we were looking at, digitizing the Bahamian economy to give Bahamians access to home ownership as well as ownership in the tourism industry, so that they can tokenize what is needed for us to grow. Whether it be, if you let's use an example. If you say you want a cruise, you want a boat or something, you want to offer cruising or you want to offer fishing, you could come to me. Let's use fishing example. I say to you, here's $300,000 for the fishing boat, instead of going to the Bank of the Bahamas or to the Development Bank. And I just, instead of paying me in cash, what I want you to do is bring me $6,000 worth of fish per month. And you know, of course, I can choose the definition of my fish, and I can ship those out of the country and get $10,000. You have your boat bringing me $6,000 of fish until you pay off the loan. I'm making a profit off of it, and so it's the same thing. The same thing. You say you want to buy, you want to have a bed and breakfast in a house. I have you build 2 bed and breakfasts in a house. If you want to, you can have it straight out as a loan, or if you want to give up part ownership, we could what we call advanced self-subscription on the tokens on that thing, where people would use this as a vacation instead, and they will end up coming for their vacations, and over 15 years, you would owe them this amount of use of that facilities to them or to someone else, but then you don't have to pay a mortgage. You have 2/3 use of any profits for 2/3. Like, so this interesting example, you have 17 weeks you'll give away, and you get 35 weeks that you get to keep for yourself, which is all profit because you have no mortgage. So
That's
it's
That's very intensive, man.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. It what happens is in sitting and waiting for the world to catch up, we kept refining and growing the possibilities of what is possible on the platform.
Gotcha. Any final thoughts, Alan?
Well, let me just say, Grand Bahama is the linchpin for the economic recovery of the Bahamas, and so we must pay attention to this debate that's going on in the Hawke's Bay Creek Agreement. This debate is between the citizens of the country, the licensees of Freeport, and the Grand Bahama Port Authority. Government is not in isolation on this, and I want people to understand the word government is both FNM and PLP. That's who makes up Parliament.
Yeah.
And so we must have a conversation, and the government is saying that no one has put out a plan for Freeport. Government has not put out a plan or strategy for Freeport in the last 10 years. And so we have no idea what government is doing or intend to do. We have no idea how the FNM will respond to what government has said. And the Port Authority itself has not put out any particular plan. And I tell people to reach out to me on social media. If you mind, I give out my phone number, 809-242-825-9700, 242-825-9700. Get a copy of the Royal Commission report and the Hawke's Bay Creek Agreement to understand this is not a Freeport battle. This is not a Grand Bahama battle. This is a battle for the economic future of the Bahamas. There can be no other economic development on New Providence. It can't hold anymore. It should be sinking by now, not from Global Stream Taiwan, from all the people there. And you, Grand Bahama is the only place that you still could buy an acre of land for under 20 grand.
Wow.
Okay, so in New Providence, you get what? For $150,000, you get the stop sign on the corner. So Grand Bahama is the future. And oh, by the way, Youri, you could buy for under 50 grand a canal front property. So
really?
you know, and so you know what it is. So I'm simply saying the Grand Bahama is the future of the Bahamas. Freeport was designed for 250,000 people in 1955. That's before vertical buildings come. So Singapore, just saying this right here, Singapore is only 30 square miles greater than Freeport. I didn't say Grand Bahama. Singapore, 30 square miles greater than Freeport, they got 6 million people, and we are better prepared than Singapore for the future of the world.
Gotcha. See, Alan, I really appreciate it, man. Thank you for being my guest today, man.
Thank you so much, man. Anytime.
Good, man. There we have another episode of Line Vibe Podcast in the books. My very competent guest, C. Alan Johnson from Freeport, Grand Bahama. And we're going to tune in again next time on Monday when we come back with Line Vibe Live with Kimberly and myself. Goodbye.